right, for this video here, we're going to continue on and look at these questions I have here. The first one is reducing fractions. So if they say write in lowest term or reduce, we need to reduce this fraction here. And the main thing that we need to do in reducing fractions, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, 48 divided by 100. We need to divide both of these numbers here by the same number, divide 148 by the same number on the top and bottom. So can you think of a number you can divide both 48 and 100? Now I know they're both divisible by 2, but I would like to find a bigger number. So I'm going to try 4 and see what happens. So if I put 4 here and 4 here, 48 divided by 4 I know is 12. And 100 divided by 4 is 25. All right, and now I have to ask myself, can I reduce it any more? Does 12 and 25 have a common factor? Can I put a number into 12 and 25? And this is not possible. So my final answer for this one here is 12 over 25. I did it. So if I would have used 2, I might not have got the final answer. I would have had to divide again by 2. But with 4, it works out perfect. Okay. The next question is rounding to 2 decimal places. So here I have to use my calculator and figure this out. So in my answer, I notice I have an extra decimal here. So let me rewrite this so that it's not wrong. So 4.52 times by, let's make this 2.143. Okay, so I'm going to ignore this decimal here. I made a mistake. Divided by 5.2. So now I have to use my calculator to do that. So let's see, calculator. Let's take a look at our numbers. So we have 4.52, and it's going to be times 2.143. And now I'm going to divide that by 5.2. So 5.2. And I get this really crazy long number. But I want to round to 2 decimal places. So look at this. Let's check this out. So this is the first decimal place, 8. And then I have a second decimal place, 6. And I'm going to look over now. Is 2 5 or higher? It's not. So I'm going to take the 1.86. And my final answer should be 1.86. So that is 2 decimal places, 1, 2, and the 2 does not change the 6. All right. So that's how we do this one. Now, if I do the next one, once again, I'm going to use my calculator, but it's going to be 3 significant figures. So let's use my calculator. I'm going to reset here. 5 times 1.34. Oops, let me try this again. 5 times 1.34 times by 56.8, 56.8 equals. So I'm going to write this number down. It's going to be 380.56. And I've asked you to round to 3 significant figures. So 1, 2, 3. You start from the very first number with significant figures, and then I look over. Is this number here 5 or higher? It is, so I have to change this number here. So if we do that, we have 3, 8, and now this 0 goes to a 1. So there's my answers there. Okay. So there we have reducing fraction, decimal places, significant figures. Okay. So we have that so far. Let's take a look at our next section. Our next section is fractions, and I did a video on fractions, so if you need to look at your fractions, you can. The first thing we need to do is find a common denominator between 7 over 9 and 1 over 5. And if we do that, the lowest common multiple between 9 and 5, if you keep going, both of these ones here is 45. So once again, you have to know your multiplication. So how did I get from 5 to 45? I times by 9. So up here, I have to also times by 9. So 1 times 9 is 9. Here, if I go from 9 to 45, I times it by 5. So that means on the top, I also have to times it by 5. So I have 35. Now I have the same denominator because I am subtracting. Now what's 35 subtract? So 35 minus 9. I'm going to subtract these. And if you do that, you get 35 minus 5. You should get 26 over, and then 45 stays the same. Okay, so there I have my answer here. The next question is similar, 5 over 8 plus 2 over 7. And I need to find the common denominator again. So what's the lowest common multiple between 7 and 8? Well, we have 8, 16, 24, 32. If you keep looking for the lowest common multiple between 7 and 8, you should get 56. Okay. And then how do I get from 7 to 56? Well, I times it by 8, so I need to times this 2 by 8, so I have 16. How do I get from 8 to 56? Well, I times it by 7, so I need to times the top by 7. So 7 times 5 is 35. Now we have the same denominator, and we can add them. So 35 plus 16 should be 51 over 56. And that will be our final answer there. So we have 51 over 56. Okay. So that's how we do those ones there. Okay. So what do we have next? We have, now we have more than one fraction. So in this case, we have to do the multiplication first. If you do the multiplication first, you have to go these on the top times together and these on the bottom times together. So what I have is 1 times 2, which is 2, 5 times 3, which is 15. And now it's a little bit tricky, but what's 1 divided by 1? Well, this here is just 1. So it's going to be 2 over 15 plus 1. And that's easy. 1 plus 2 over 15 is 1 and 2 over 15. A little bit tricky, but not so hard. That's going to be my final answer here. Okay. The next question here is division. And then if you looked at my other video, you have to know that for division, you keep the first fraction the same. You flip the sign to multiplication. So this division becomes multiplication. And then now the 1 and 6, you have to flip over. So it's 6 and 1. The 5 over 8, I'm not going to add yet. So I'm just doing this piece here. So 3 times 6 multiplied together is 18. And 4 times 1 is 4. And these are going to be added together with 5 over 8. And at this point, you need to make this number 4 the same common denominator as 8. So if you look at that, you should figure out that both of them have the lowest common multiple of 8. All right, so instead of going up and down here, I'm just going to keep them underneath. How did I go from 4 to 8? Well, I times it by 2. So I need to take 18 and times it by 2 as well. And you get 36. How did you go from 8 to 8? Well, times by 1. So you need to go 5 times 1, and that doesn't change. And at this point, you can add 36 plus 5, and you get your 41 over 8. And there you have it. That's your answer for this one here, 41 over 8. Okay. Then I'm going to move the window here so that you can do the last one. So there we go. So the next one has to do with percentages. Okay, so we're back to percentages. If you want to write the following decimals as percentages, this is very easy. You just take this here, times by 100, use your calculator. If you times 0.14 times 100, every time you times by 100, you move the decimal over twice. So this is 14%. 2 over 7, Well, it's easy if we have a decimal. So what you should do is you should use your calculator. So if we use your calculator and we change, first of all, this fraction 2 divided by 7 into a decimal, then we can times this by 100. And here we have 28.57. So let's take a look. We go 2 divided by 7 on our calculator. And this number afterwards, we're going to times it by 100. And let's take a look at this. I have 28.57. So I'm going to round this to one decimal place, 28 point. Let's see, one decimal place, that means 5. Is that bigger? Yep, so I got to make the 5 higher. 28.6. Okay. And there you go. There's your page 3.